Picture a woman standing at her kitchen sink sometime around 8:30 in the evening. The dishes are done. The counters are wiped. The children are in bed. She dries her hands on a dish towel, reaches over to the small lamp on the side table, and turns it off. She is not doing this because she read something about blue light. She is not following a wind-down routine she found in a magazine. She is tired. Her body has been working since before the sun came up, and now it is telling her, plainly and without argument, that the day is finished. She will be asleep within the hour. You right now have a mattress that cost more than her refrigerator. You have a pillow designed by engineers. You have an app on your phone that tracks your sleep cycles and sends you a score in the morning. And you are still lying awake at midnight, staring at the ceiling, wondering why your brain will not stop. That gap between her rest and yours is not explained by how hard life is. Her life was not easier. She had no dishwasher. She did laundry by hand or with a machine that needed constant attention. She ironed every single piece of clothing by hand. She cooked 3 meals from scratch. She carried groceries, managed the house, raised children, without the network of conveniences that surrounds modern parents. And in many cases did all of it quietly, without complaint, and without a single conversation about self-care. Her worries were not small. The 1950s were not a soft decade. The memory of war was still fresh. Money was tight in most households. Illness could arrive without warning and without the medical safety nets people rely on today. She had real problems, real weight, real exhaustion, and in the quiet of the night she slept. Not because life was gentle with her. She slept because her day had a shape, because her body was given honest work and honest rest in the right order, because the house around her followed a rhythm that, without anyone naming it or designing it, acted like a system. Every habit, every fixed hour, every room that went quiet at a certain time was doing something for her nervous system that no supplement on the market has fully replaced. That is what this video is about. Not the idea that the past was perfect. It was not. Not the idea that women in the 1950s had it figured out and modern women have failed. That is not what the evidence says. What the evidence says is quieter and more useful than that. It says that sleep for most of human history was not something people managed. It was something that happened when the conditions were right. And the 1950s housewife, without knowing it, spent her entire day building those conditions. If you are new here, this channel is about the daily systems that ordinary women used in the past. Habits from the kitchen, the bedroom, the bathroom, the laundry room, that quietly solved problems we now spend a great deal of money trying to fix. If that kind of thing interests you, subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. And before we go further, tell me where you are watching from. Are you in a small town, a city apartment, a farmhouse? Did the evenings in the house you grew up in feel different from evenings now? Drop it in the comments. It always says something interesting about what we have kept and what we have lost. Now, the first thing to understand about why she slept is the simplest, and it is the one modern life has done the most to remove. Her body was genuinely tired. Not the flat, drained, foggy kind of tired that comes from sitting in front of a screen for 9 hours. Not the overstimulated, wired but weary feeling that makes you want to sleep but prevents you from actually doing it. Physical tired, muscle tired. The kind of tired that arrives when a body has been used the way a body is designed to be used. Moving, lifting, carrying, scrubbing, walking, standing. The average 1950s housewife walked several miles inside her own home on a typical day. She did not count those steps or log them. She was not doing it for her health. She was doing the dishes, and then walking to put them away, and then walking back to the stove, and then carrying laundry down to the basement, and then back up. The physical output of managing a home without modern appliances was significant. And that output, accumulated over a full day, produced a very specific biological result. Her body released the kind of chemical signals that tell the brain the work is finished. Her temperature dropped in the evening the way a body is supposed to. Her muscles were asking for rest long before she reached for the lamp. Modern tiredness often does not work the same way. The body has been still all day, but the nervous system has been running at high speed. The result is a kind of internal contradiction. Physically underused, mentally overloaded, and it produces exactly the kind of restlessness that keeps people awake. You are not tired in the right way. You are depleted in the wrong direction. She did not have that problem. The work sorted it out for her before dinner was even on the table. But the body being tired was only one part of the picture. The other part was the house itself. Because in the 1950s, the home had its own clock, and it kept better time than most people do today. The kitchen was the first room to go quiet each evening, and what happened when that kitchen closed is where the real story starts. The kitchen closed after dinner. That sentence sounds simple, but follow it for a moment, because it carried more weight than it appears to. In a 1950s household, dinner was not an event that dissolved into the rest of the evening. It had a start and it had an end. The dishes were done, the leftovers were wrapped and put away, the counters were wiped down, and that was it. The kitchen was finished for the night. Nobody came back at 9:30 looking for something to snack on. Nobody stood in front of the open refrigerator at 10 o'clock, letting cold air out while scrolling through their phone with the other hand. The kitchen closed the way a shop closes, and the body understood that signal even if nobody explained it. This mattered for sleep in ways that go deeper than simple willpower or habit. Eating late keeps the digestive system running when it is supposed to be winding down. It keeps blood sugar moving in directions that interfere with the slow, quiet drop in body temperature and alertness that the body needs in order to cross into real rest. The 1950s housewife was not aware of any of this in those terms. She was not reading about insulin responses or circadian rhythms. She was simply following the shape of the day that her mother had followed, and her mother's mother before that. Dinner at a fixed hour, kitchen closed after. No wandering back in for more. Fixed meal times did something else too. They regulated the body's internal clock in a way that most people have completely dismantled without realizing it. When you eat at roughly the same time every day, the body begins to anticipate it. Cortisol, which is the hormone that helps you feel alert and ready to move, rises naturally in the morning. It drops through the afternoon and evening. Hunger and energy follow that same arc. The 1950s household, by eating breakfast at a consistent hour, lunch at a consistent hour, and dinner at a consistent hour, was reinforcing that arc every single day. The body knew what time it was, not because of a clock on the wall, but because of the rhythm of the meals. Disrupt that rhythm. Eat at different times every day. Skip meals, snack constantly through the evening, and the body loses that internal signal. It stops knowing when to be alert and when to prepare for rest. The 1950s housewife did not have to fight her body at midnight, because her body already knew from years of consistent meals what midnight was supposed to feel like. It was supposed to feel like sleep. After the kitchen closed, the evening settled into a shape. And this shape was not dramatic or elaborate. It was not a carefully designed wind-down routine. It was simply what happened when a household had finished its work and the night had begun. The dishes were done together, or she did them alone. Either way, it was a physical, quiet task with a clear end point. Then there might be a little sitting, a husband reading the paper, children doing homework at the table before being sent to bed, the radio on low in the background, playing something that did not demand attention, not news that upset, not programming that required emotional investment late into the night. Just sound that sat in the room without pulling anyone forward. Lighting shifted too, and this was not a conscious decision about sleep hygiene. It was practical. Overhead lights in many homes of that era were harsher and less pleasant to sit under. For long periods in the evening, lamps were warmer. People naturally gravitated toward the lamp-lit corner of the living room after dinner. The light was lower, softer, and less aggressive to the eyes. The body, reading that change in light, began its own quiet preparations. The shift from bright overhead light to warm lamplight in the evening is now something sleep researchers actively recommend. The 1950s household arrived there not through science, but through habit, and the simple preference for warmth over glare. The children went to bed at a fixed hour. This was not negotiable. A child in the 1950s did not stay up until the adults went to sleep. There was a bedtime and it was kept, and once the children were down, the house became quieter still. That quiet was not accidental. It was part of the structure. It told every nervous system in the house that the active portion of the day was behind them. There was also, in most households, a point where the work simply stopped. Not because everything was finished. It never was entirely. But because the hour had arrived when continuing was not expected of anyone, the housewife of the 1950s was not lying in bed composing mental lists of everything left undone and calculating how early she would need to wake to catch up. The day had a container. When the container was full, the day was over. What remained waited for morning, and that was understood and accepted by everyone in the household. This is not romanticizing the past. Women of that era had frustrations, limitations and burdens that were real and significant. The children in bed, the work stopping at a natural point, created a set of conditions that guided the nervous system toward rest without requiring any particular effort or discipline. The rhythm did the work. Modern evenings rarely have that container. Work emails arrive after 10. Kitchens stay open until someone finally decides to stop. Lights stay bright. Children negotiate bedtimes. The transition from day to night is blurred into a long, formless middle ground, where the brain never quite receives permission to let go. She did not need permission. The house gave it to her on the same schedule every night. But the house going quiet was only one layer of the system. The deeper layer was what was not coming into that house after dark, and what the absence of it did for her mind. That is where the next piece of the answer lives. The news ended, not paused, not muted, ended. The evening radio broadcast finished at a fixed hour, and that was the last the 1950s housewife heard of the outside world until morning. There was no refresh button, no notification pulling her back into a story that had updated while she was doing the dishes. No algorithm deciding that because she listened to one troubling report, she probably wanted 3 more. The broadcast ended, the dial stayed where it was, and the room stayed quiet. This was not a small thing for the nervous system. Worry in the 1950s was real. Women of that era had lived through the Second World War, and many had lost people in it. The Korean War had followed almost immediately. There were real fears about the economy, about illness, about the future. These women were not floating through a carefree decade, but the worries had a natural stopping point built into the structure of the day. When the broadcast ended, the information stopped arriving. The mind could not chase a story that was no longer being fed to it. Worry existed, but it did not have an endless supply chain delivering new material through the night. A nervous system that is being asked to process new threatening information at 11 in the evening cannot prepare for sleep at the same time. Those two states require completely different chemistry. Alertness and rest do not run together. When the outside world kept arriving into the house, through a screen, through a feed, through a notification on the nightstand, the brain stayed in a posture of readiness. Ready for what? It did not know, but it stayed ready. She did not have that problem. The world stopped arriving at a predictable hour, and her brain was allowed to close the door. The telephone helped enforce this without meaning to. In the 1950s, calling someone late in the evening was considered poor manners. Telephoning a household after 8:30 or 9 o'clock was something you only did in an emergency. This social rule meant that the housewife's evening was not interrupted by conversations that could have waited until morning. The phone sat on the wall or the side table, and it did not make noise after a certain hour because the social code did not permit it. Her attention was her own after dinner. Nobody was reaching for it. Compare that to the average evening today. The phone beside the bed receives messages, alerts, news updates, and social notifications through the night. The brain, even during light sleep, registers sound and light at a level that disrupts the depth of rest. Even people who believe they sleep through their notifications are often experiencing shallower sleep because of them. The 1950s housewife slept in a room that was genuinely dark and genuinely silent, not because she was disciplined about it, but because the technology and the social rules of her time simply did not permit anything else. Her bedroom was also, in most cases, only a bedroom. There was no television in it in the early part of the decade, no desk pulled in for working late, no pile of unfinished tasks sitting in the corner reminding her of tomorrow. The room had one purpose, and the brain learned that purpose the way the brain learns any repeated association. Walking into that room meant one thing. The body responded accordingly. Do you remember the last time your house went quiet before you did? Not quiet because you finally put the phone down and turned off the last screen, but quiet because the evening had simply arrived at its natural end and the house had settled around you. That experience of the environment making the decision rather than you having to force it is something most people today have not had in years, if ever. The 1950s housewife did not decide to go to sleep. She arrived at sleep because everything around her had been steering toward it for the previous 3 or 4 hours. The kitchen closed, the light changed, the children went to bed, the broadcast ended. The phone went silent, and the room she walked into had never been used for anything else. Each of those things was a signal, and the signals accumulated the way water fills a glass, steadily, predictably, without drama. There was also the matter of the shared clock. The entire neighborhood operated on roughly the same schedule. Households around her were also finishing their evenings at similar hours. The street went quiet. The lights in nearby windows went dark. There was a kind of collective permission in that, a social agreement that the day was over and the night had begun. Nobody was signaling, through a lit window or a noise from next door, that staying up later was normal or expected. The community rhythm reinforced the household rhythm, and the household rhythm reinforced the body's rhythm. This is almost entirely gone now. The 24-hour economy, the global nature of digital connection, and the fact that someone somewhere is always awake and always producing content means that the external environment no longer gives anyone a consistent signal that night has arrived. The night looks almost identical to the day if you are looking at a screen. The brain cannot tell the difference between 2 in the afternoon and 2 in the morning based on light from a phone, so it stops trying to tell the difference at all. She did not have to override any of this. Her environment handled it. Her social world enforced it. Her body, trained by years of the same rhythm, leaned into the quiet when it arrived and did not resist it. The house went quiet. The world went quiet. And then she did. But something was lost between that era and this one that goes beyond the phone and the television. The structure itself was dismantled piece by piece by forces that had nothing to do with sleep, and everything to do with the economy and the way modern life expanded into the hours that used to belong to rest. Understanding what broke the rhythm is the only honest way to talk about whether any of it can be put back. The rhythm did not collapse overnight. It eroded slowly across several decades through a series of changes that each seemed reasonable on their own, and only revealed their combined effect much later. None of those changes were designed to ruin sleep. They were designed to sell things, extend productivity, and fill time. Sleep was not the target. It was simply what got displaced when everything else expanded. The first pressure came from electric light, not its invention. Electric light had been in homes for decades before the 1950s. But its normalization as something that could and should push the evening later arrived gradually through the middle of the 20th century. Staying up past 10 became ordinary, then past 11. The body's relationship with darkness, which had governed human rest for all of recorded history, began to soften. Light became something you controlled rather than something that controlled you. And when you control it, you stop reading it as a signal. You stop letting it tell you when the day is finished. Television accelerated this shift in our nightly habits. In the early 1950s, television was still new, and programming ended at a reasonable hour. But the medium grew, the hours extended, and by the end of the decade, households were watching later and later into the night. The broadcast that had once ended and left the room quiet now kept going. And unlike the radio, television demanded the eyes. It kept the brain's visual system active in a way that radio never had. The lamplit, quiet evening that had belonged to rest began to shrink. Then came the 24-hour economy. Shops that once closed in the evening stayed open. Work that once ended when the office closed followed people home through answering machines. Then computers, then phones that sat on the nightstand and never fully switched off. The container the 1950s housewife had relied on, the invisible wall between the working day and the resting night, was taken apart brick by a world that decided the hours between 10 and 6 in the morning were an opportunity rather than a boundary. And then the phone arrived in the bedroom, and the last signal the body had been receiving, darkness, quiet, a room with a single purpose, was replaced with a glowing rectangle that carried every anxiety, every piece of news, every unfinished conversation, Every comparison and every demand that the waking world had ever produced, available continuously, at full brightness, from the pillow. The modern sleep industry was born to fill the hole that all of this created. Weighted blankets, white noise machines, melatonin gummies in 3 different strengths, sleep tracking apps that measure your cycles and assign you a score, magnesium supplements, blackout curtains, blue light glasses, cooling mattress pads. Each of these products is a purchased substitute for something the 1950s household provided for free through structure. The closed kitchen replaced by a gummy that tells your body it is nighttime. The darkened room replaced by a curtain you have to buy and hang. The quiet street replaced by a machine that plays the sound of rain because the actual night outside is no longer silent. None of those products are useless. Some of them help genuinely. But they are individual pieces being sold back to people who were robbed of the whole system. Buying a magnesium supplement while keeping the kitchen open until midnight, the phone on the nightstand, and the television running until sleep finally forces itself is like patching one hole in a boat that has 12. The water still comes in. The rhythm is still broken. What the 1950s housewife had was not a collection of sleep hacks. It was a life structured in a way that made rest the natural conclusion of every day. The physical work tired her body honestly. The fixed meals kept her internal clock synchronized. The closed kitchen ended the evening's eating. The lamp-lit room told her eyes that the bright part of the day was over. The ended broadcast stopped the world from arriving. The shared social clock gave her permission. The bedroom was only a bedroom, and none of it required a single decision at 11 o'clock at night, because the decisions had already been made by the structure of the day itself. What is one thing in your evening that used to have a stopping point and no longer does? Not a dramatic thing, a small one. The kitchen that used to close after dinner but now stays open until you finally go to bed. The news that used to end but now refreshes every 4 minutes. The work conversation that used to stop when you left the building but now arrives on your phone at 9:30 at night. Most of the damage was done quietly, one small extension at a time. And it can begin to be undone the same way. Not all of it, and not at once. The 24-hour economy is not going anywhere. The phone is not disappearing. But the rhythm can be partially rebuilt in the same way it was originally built. Not through a dramatic overhaul, but through small, consistent boundaries that the body learns to read as signals. A kitchen that closes. A lamp instead of an overhead light after a certain hour. A phone that goes into another room at a fixed time. A room that goes back to being only a bedroom. These are not revolutionary acts. They are ordinary habits that ordinary women maintained without thinking about them, because the world around them had not yet dismantled the structure that made them natural. She did not fix her sleep. She never broke it. The rhythm was the protection, and she inherited it the way she inherited the recipe box on the counter and the dish towel on the hook. Not because someone explained why it worked, but because the women before her had kept it and passed it forward without making a fuss. The lamp went off, the house went dark, the street outside settled into silence, and rest arrived not because she summoned it or earned it or optimized for it, but because she had spent the entire day without knowing it, building the conditions that made it inevitable. That system can be rebuilt, not all at once, but one quiet evening at a time. One closed kitchen, one lamp switched on instead of the overhead light. One closed kitchen, one lamp switched on instead of the overhead light. One phone left in another room. The rhythm remembers itself faster than you might expect. The body has not forgotten what rest is supposed to feel like. It is just waiting for the right conditions to arrive again. If this kind of forgotten wisdom is something you want more of, subscribe so you do not miss what comes next on this channel. There is always another drawer to open, another habit to dust off, another ordinary thing that worked better than we gave it credit for.